get underway. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to our July virtual tasting. Very excited to have Sue Tipton from Acquiesce Wines here with us today. First time we have ever done all whites. Super exciting, and some of the best whites that I know I personally have ever had. I've been champing at the bit to open these. We had a little preview party with a couple of our club members and some of their friends on Sunday night when I was delivering the wines, and the reviews we got about these wines were just absolutely through the roof. So very exciting. A good friend of Allison's, Allison has talked up these wines tremendously. So I'm excited to talk with Sue. Of course, as we always say, you know, we're going to have everybody muted for this. If you want to ask Sue any questions or comments, or of course, mention if you're noshing on something while we're chatting, go ahead and throw those into the chat and we will incorporate those into our discussion. And then at the tail end, we'll leave some time for y'all to chat with Sue to begin with. But Sue, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for hosting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always start out by asking, what is the most memorable bottle of wine that you've ever opened?
Well, it's a white Chateauneuf-du-Pape. And actually, that is the wine that started me on my wine journey. I was in my 50s when I tried this wine. Oh. And it actually propelled me to plant the varietals here in the Lodi AVA and focus only on whites in the winery. But it was a white Chateauneuf-du-Pape. I had been a wine drinker my whole life. I had never tried that wine. The one I tried was not very oaked. It was a really bright, minerally wine. And I sought to try to recreate that, and I did, and many more.
Do you remember the producer? Is that one of those details that's been lost to the ephemera of time?
I'd like to have a romantic story about it, but I actually picked up the wine at Bevmo.
Okay.
And it was a Bevmo custom, very small lot wine. And
did you go back and get the second bottle for a nickel?
Well, I went back and I said, this is the most amazing wine I've ever had. I would like a case of this wine. I put the bottle down on the counter. They got on their computer and said, that's the last bottle in California. And I was like, ooh, what is this wine and why is it so good and why can't you get it? So that started me on my journey to realize that only 5 to 6% of the grapes in that region are white. Most of them stay in France. They export to 50 different countries. When you find these wines in the US, they're usually in the $75 to $100 a bottle price range. And so that kind of explained why I hadn't tried it before, even though we lived in Europe for a while, and you would think one would have crossed my path, but it hadn't. So
interesting. Where were you living in Europe?
So we were living in Sweden.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So a lot of European wines there, but not that one.
Yeah, it's always interesting. So just so we have the order, we're going to start with the Picpoul Blanc. We're going to be enjoying that first. So if you've got that open, go ahead. Then we'll be moving on to the Grenache Blanc, then the Bourboulenc, then the Clairette Blanche. So we've got it's great. We've got BC and AD for you. We have, you know, the pre-Chateauneuf and post-Chateauneuf. So what?
Sue, I was going to say, because we had met before I ever tried my first white Chateauneuf-du-Pape, I had the Chateau Leneuf. And the minute I took a sip of it, I was like, I completely understand where Sue's coming from. It's exquisite. It's extraordinary. And the fun thing is that, like Chateauneuf-du-Pape, it's just a blend of how many grapes? I mean,
it just depends. You know, there's about 7 whites, that they are allowed to plant there. And actually, I had a Chateauneuf, the Chateau de Neuf on Monday. I had a 19 blend. And the one thing I noticed, the difference is, you know, they put a bit of oak on it, and they do put it through malolactic fermentation, which, you know, we can talk about, but that's something that we do differently here. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to get into your style of winemaking because it is very unique in that if what Allison told me is correct, you basically do the same technique, the same structure across all of your wines. So there's not a lot of differentiation. You're kind of treating everything the same and allowing the grape to really stand on its own and have unique flavors from the other grapes that you're working with.
Right, right. So everything is hand harvested, sorted in the vineyard and sorted at the press, whole cluster pressed. We ferment in stainless steel chilled tanks. And so we're trying to get the expression of the fruit and trying not to add oak or anything to take away from. I think that's the great thing about Lodi is you get this great fruit forwardness expression. And if you've had a big Zin from Lodi, that's the first thing you notice is when you put the glass up to your nose, you get this explosion of fruit. And so that's something I'm trying to maintain in my wines by not putting them through malolactic fermentation, which will mute the nose, and also by adding oak. So it's all stainless.
Yeah, and Carrie wants to know if these are 100% whole cluster. Are you doing whole cluster presses or are you destemming?
Not destemming, everything's whole cluster. We have a pneumatic press and we're able to put about 2.5 tons of grapes in the press at a time. So we have some long days during harvest, but yes, whole cluster pressing.
So I want to back up a little bit. What were you doing in the pre-Chateauneuf-du-Pape era? You mentioned that you were a wine lover, but you weren't in the wine industry. So what were you doing at that point?
Well, you know, for most of my life, well, married life at least, my husband was a corporate executive and we relocated all over. We're from Chicago. We moved to Michigan, Sweden, Colorado, Oregon, Texas, and then California.
Wow,
and
you got a lot of stamps on the passport.
Yeah, raising 3 boys and working along the way myself, but not in the wine industry. We purchased a home in a vineyard when we moved to Lodi, and right away I fell in love with the process of making wine. I was always a foodie. I'm an Irish girl from Chicago, and I was familiar with alcohol also. But we were always entertained. So like every weekend we entertained. And when I moved out of the house, I didn't realize not everybody entertains all weekend long. So I'm pretty much duplicating that here with the tasting room being open. And so we have people here every weekend. But yeah, so yeah.
Back up a little bit. I know you said you traveled, but before you bought a vineyard,
yeah,
you had some aspirations to maybe buy a vineyard, or, you know, to find a retirement place, I should say, not a vineyard per se.
Well, actually, we were looking for a spot in the country, and I think I could probably talk about the name Acquiesce if you're interested.
Allison's good at asking leading questions.
Lead-in questions.
She'd be a terrible attorney. But
So when we were living in Portland, Oregon, my husband Rodney had did another international trip, and I think it was 8 countries in 10 days.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, we're sitting on the patio drinking wine, and Katie Lang, the Canadian singer, was playing on the stereo, and her song Acquiesce was playing. And in that song, she's surrendering to either, you can't tell if it's a higher power or another person. And Rodney turned to me and he said, one day we're going to have a place and we're going to call it Acquiesce. And I said, really? What's it going to be like? And he said, well, we're going to see the sunrise and the sunset, and we're going to have a lot of property, and we're going to really enjoy ourselves there. So when we purchased the ranch, we called it Acquiesce because it had this visionary name. And several years later, when we decided to open a winery, we already had a name for the winery.
Nice.
So, and
that's great.
Well,
yeah, mine would be called War Pigs, but that's only because I'm a big Black Sabbath fan. So how did you come to settle upon Lodi with all of the traveling that you've done, all the areas that you've seen? And again, when I tell people about, you know, single variety Rhone whites, the last thing that comes to mind, well, maybe the second to last thing behind like Bordeaux, is Lodi. So how did you come to settle in there and then decide that, you know, obviously the Chateauneuf-du-Pape thing is what led you to the Rhone varietals?
Yeah, so, you know, we purchased the vineyard first. Our vineyard had 12 acres of Zinfandel when we bought the vineyard. We really didn't have an interest in making wine with Zin. There was a lot of it. And the Zin we had planted there was planted for white Zin. So it was on a Freedom Vigorous rootstock. It wouldn't make the best red Zin, let's put it that way. And so we really didn't have an interest in that. But we just started planting the Grenache Blanc and we were so thrilled with it. But of course, you know, all this comes at an expense. So we did our homework and we realized that Lodi is a Mediterranean climate, like the southern region of France. They have a diurnal shift in the temperature like we do, only ours is more extreme. We might be a couple degrees hotter on average during the day in the summer, but we're more than 2 degrees cooler in the evening. So if we have a 95-degree day here, we'll have a 60-degree evening. So that cools off the grapes. And we knew that grapes had been grown in Lodi since the 1800s. And there have been a lot of whites grown previous to all this in. So it was French Colombard years ago. We knew that. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it was probably because we were ignorant that we planted all these varietals, and you know, people are like, "Really, you're planting these?" But it's really shown that Lodi is actually meant for white wines, and we have sandy Tokay loam soils here. We have a Mediterranean climate. And if you put those things together, it actually speaks more to the white grapes of the southern Rhone region than it does of the red grapes. I mean, Napa has a very similar temperature range that we do, but no one says, how could you plant Cabernet, which is grown in a much cooler climate in France?
Right.
So I'm always confused when people say white wines in Lodi, yeah, we're teaching them, and there's been a lot more whites planted here since we started.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what specifically brought you to Lodi? Because it sounds like, you know, you could have had your choice of Monterey or Sonoma or Paso Robles or Santa Barbara, but how did you specifically, you know, kind of target in on Lodi? Did you have some history there, or was it
no
just
history?
Kind of...
No, my husband's career took him to the Lathrop area. So this was a 35-minute drive for him to work. And we had lots of choices to move closer to that region, but we wanted something a little more country. Lodi has 110,000 acres of wine grapes planted here. It's very country feeling. The people are—
Except for wine and roses. That's very nice.
Yeah, that's very upscale. Yes. And, you know, it has a very country feel. The downtown Lodi looks like something off of the Andy Griffith show. You know, it just looks like, yeah, really cute. And the people are really nice. So
I think a lot of people, myself included, before I've been to Lodi, I always pictured sort of large area, you know, a large agricultural area, and very rustic and simplistic in terms of tourism. But the downtown Lodi is so charming. And, you know, it really is, not in August, but any other time, a great place to visit, despite the heat. I think there's charm. There's little restaurants and shops, and, you know, just not to be underestimated.
Yeah, and it's really cute and quaint. And we were looking for something that was like that. We've lived in big cities, and we grew up in a big city, and we didn't want to live in a big city again. And we were hoping to be able to stay longer. So this is actually the longest we've lived anywhere as a married couple, and we'll be married 45 years next month. So
wow, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So it's worked for us. Let's put it that way.
Very nice. Very nice. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Picpoul, the Picpoul Blanc that we're enjoying, because you mentioned that you started with Grenache Blanc, and we'll talk about that with the next one. But Picpoul is an interesting grape. It's a, you know, kind of Rhone grape in I guess, by proximity. It's Rhone adjacent. It's really grown down in the Languedoc region. You have the Picpoul de Pinet, AOC down in that area. But it's a grape that I have found, at least here in Paso Robles, over the last 10 years, has kind of seen an explosion going from absolutely zero of it to quite probably, I would say, maybe fourth or fifth on the list, but kind of with a bullet coming up. So how did you decide to plant Picpoul? Where were you sourcing your vines from?
So I'm sure many of you know, we source most of them from Tablas Creek. They're the ones that brought these beautiful varieties over. And I'm friends with Jason Haas. We were on the board, the Rhone Ranger board together. And so I have so much respect for Jason and Tablas and all they're doing. To come up with Picpoul, I was looking to kind of recreate this white Rhone blend that I fell in love with. So we had Grenache Blanc planted, and I was looking for a more acidic grape varietal. And so we only planted 100 vines initially of Picpoul Blanc. I was just familiar with the Picpoul Blancs from Languedoc that were the lower priced Picpouls that were screechingly acidic.
Yes.
And I thought, I'm never going to be able to sell this in the tasting room. But what we found out very quickly was the Lodi region gives us this great expression of fruit, and it's not necessary to have that screeching acidity. You have a great acidity. It's the most acidic wine that we have. But you also have this other characteristics of, flowery characteristics, acidity, smooth, lemon, lime characters to it. So I had it in a tank, and everyone that worked for me said, you have to put this in a bottle all by itself. And so for many years, we only had 65 cases. And so it would sell out within a couple months until I planted another acre. And I just last month planted 2 more acres of Picpoul Blanc. So
oh, wow.
Yeah, right now we have 3 acres planted. But I think it's a really fun summer wine. It goes with so many foods, and it's great to drink on its own. Meant to go with oysters, mussels, and shellfish. And if you spend any time in France on a Friday night, people are sitting on at the cafes with a bottle of Picpoul Blanc and a plate of oysters, whether it's in the Languedoc region or, we've stayed closer to Chateauneuf-du-Pape, and you still see that behavior there. It's just a way to celebrate Friday nights. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Of course, in France, its nickname is the lip stinger because of that high acidity. So when you're out in the vineyard, you're tending to your vines, you're testing the grapes, what are you looking for to make sure that acidity doesn't get too high? Is there a way that you're keeping the vines shaded or keeping the grapes shaded to ensure that the acidity doesn't spike, or is it just the natural terroir in Lodi that keeps that acid at a lower realm?
So we pick the grapes at about 20 bricks, which is the lowest of all of the bricks levels that we pick, which are sugar levels. We do have a VSP system where our grapes are trained up into a trellis, and we keep the south side shaded with the vines and the leaves so that the grapes don't burn, and the north side is pretty much exposed. We do walk the vineyard all the time, and that's one advantage we have having all these varietals here. And a lot of it is taste. So I've been doing this now with Picpoul for about 12 years, and you get a real sense of what it should taste like in addition to the bricks readings that you get. So it's a learned thing. But I'll say Picpoul is the easiest grape for a winemaker because it has a great acidity. You bring it in, it's not a problem child in the winery. And I think that also is a reason that more of it's being planted, in addition to the fact that it tastes great.
Yeah. I guess, is it that higher acidity that tends to aid in the fermentation? I guess you don't get a lot of stuck fermentations with it. It just kind of works its magic.
Yeah, I mean, if you have wines in the winery that have high acidity, you really have no problems with them. When you get to unusual varietals like our Roussanne that comes in at higher pH levels, that's when you have to really watch them, because you don't have the protection of the acidity during fermentation. So.
Nice. And so how long will you typically keep these in stainless steel? How long will you bottle them? What's kind of your release schedule? And is it the same across the board, or is that an area where you'll kind of test things, or basically see what you've sold, what you don't, what you can work with?
So Picpoul, like I said, is one of the easiest ones. It doesn't require a lot of attention. Some of our other varietals, we want to achieve a bigger mouthfeel with them. So we will stir them on their lees over a period of 6 months. Picpoul, not so much. We just like the way it is naturally, but we pick it right around Labor Day, typically. And we ferment in jacketed chilled tanks. It takes about 30 days for fermentation. And we rack off of the wine. And then we have a process where we actually fine the wine. And so it stays in tank typically until about March. So at that time, we have a mobile bottling truck come, and they bottle all our wines. And so right now we have nothing in tank, but in a couple months, we'll have a lot in tank. We keep wondering if we'll have enough tanks, actually, always.
Yes, I imagine as you're planting more, you've got, you do have a 2 to 3 year, or I guess 3 to 4 year buffer, where once you plant, you've got a little bit of time to plan ahead. But it's always a growing business, and I guess that's a good way to do it. So we'll talk a little bit about how, as you mentioned, you love to entertain, be hospitable, so you pair all your wines with the food pairings. Jeannie and Mike, who are our resident vegans here, and they have Gail with them tonight, enjoyed this with vegan scallops, which are trumpet royale mushrooms in a garlic lemon sauce. Matt and Carrie and their crew had this with lemon chicken, and they actually made your California Sunshine Canapé to go with this
nice.
as well.
Very cute.
Which is got right there. Yes. So take us through how you come up with these pairings. You mentioned, being a foodie, so I suspect you have lots of recipes at the ready, or lots of food ideas whenever you taste a wine. And do the pairings typically stay the same vintage to vintage, or are you always kind of creating new pairings each new vintage?
Yeah, so I must say too, I'm a big part of determining the pairings, but they are kind of the brainchild of my husband as far as creating new and different ones. And so he's been doing that for years. And this year we actually enlisted the help of a friend of ours who runs a bed and breakfast in town, and she's been trained in culinary skills in France. And so she's been bringing some new insight to it. But every month we feature 4 different wines with 4 different food bites. So that's changed every month. So we get together every month, decide which wines we're going to be featuring and what pairings that we should have. So when you come in to taste, it's not standing at a tasting bars, it's a seated tasting, and it's with the little pairings that we are featuring.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And having been in your tasting room, I can vouch that it very much feels like a very French country restaurant. Like if you're down in the Rhone and you sort of go into a small town and find a little local restaurant, it has that same kind of bistro feel, which is adorable. So.
Well, that's how I want to taste wine. I want to taste it sitting down, not standing at a bar with 100 people. And I want to try it with little food bites, because I feel the French kind of have it. You just always have wine with your food. And I just think it highlights both. So we always try to find pairings that, not only highlight the wine, but highlight the food also.
I think what's really great about this wine, because, you guys have been talking about the acidity of the Picpoul, but it also has this nice texture in the mid palate. It's not like a lot of times when you think acidity, think like a sharp Riesling or a Sauvignon Blanc, or, when you think high acid, think of a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Right.
But what's nice about this is it's got all that acidity, but it doesn't overpower because of that lovely texture on the mid palate. And I think that to the notes you were talking about, Sue, like the lemon lime and also the floral, I think that both what Jeannie, Mike, and Matt and Carrie all got right was the lemon in their dishes, because you're finding a lovely, not a contrast, but this lovely synergy that are going to both kind of make them go like that.
Both work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Although I will say that the contrast to that is I think you can almost use this wine as if it was a lemon wedge and do something like a nice fried piece of fish or a baked or roasted piece of fish, or like she was saying earlier, if you pair this with clams and mussels, you know, you have the acid to pair with this. I just finished an amazing show on Hulu called The Bear, which is all about a young, like hotshot Michelin starred chef who goes back to Chicago to run his family's like Italian beef joint and is trying to class it up. And in the final episode, there's a chef who keeps presenting him with a dish, a risotto with short ribs. And he keeps telling her it's not ready, it's not ready. And she doesn't know what to do. And finally, after a big blow up they have, he texts her and says, "No acid." And she's like, "What?" And he says, "There wasn't enough acid in the dish. You need to find something." And it like set a light bulb on her. So this wine reminded me of that moment, which I just happened to watch this afternoon, but that's okay.
But I can see how it would work with the mussels and clams, because you get the creaminess of the food, but you're not getting too much. Whereas I know as we get into some of the other wines, I don't think this is a wine to pair with a buttery dish.
No.
Because I think the butter will overpower. There's a lightness to this, even though it's got body, a little weight and texture, there's a lightness to it that you want to keep what you're pairing fresher and brighter.
Right.
Yeah. I was thinking something like, you know, sauteed sand dabs, or even like fried calamari, I think would be fantastic with this. Something that has that kind of fried, earthy neutralness to it. And then this can provide that strong acid blank to it. Yes. All right. We'll move on.
My question, Matt, is that a way to push us to move on? Or maybe it's the idea that you were hesitant about 4 whites and you're so excited to drink 4 whites tonight.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for saying it's the latter and not my pacing. So let's move on. And we should point out that Picpoul was a 2019, which, you know, there are some people who have the never drink a like 3-year or older California white, but I think you're really showing that, you know, California whites can hold up quite well to aging and improve and keep their acidity, keep their brightness, still have the flavor, not overly oxidized. We move on to the 2020 Grenache Blanc.
On that note, Sue, if this is the 2019 and we're moving to 2020, in your experience, how far back are you comfortable going? Picpoul 2018, 2017, how are they showing today? Or do you think?
Yeah, you know, I always say it's, you know, a lot of it depends. So like the wines are doing well several years out. So the wines back to, you know, 17, 18 are pretty much doing fine. It's just, do you like older whites? And that's the thing, because I tend to like younger whites. My husband likes the older whites. And so it just depends. And so we've done side-by-side comparisons in the tasting room where we'd have like an old Roussanne and the newer Roussanne. And it's been about 50-50, where some people are like, I really like this. And then others are like, well, I don't have to age it because I like it, you know, older. So, but I'd say for the most part, you know, 3-4 years is good. And if you're liking the older whites, that's when you maybe experiment. We found that the blends tend to age better than the single varietals also. So we have one of our tasting room staff just tried it at 13 Blanc, which is one of our blends, and said it was lovely. Decanted it. So I mean, that goes back quite a ways.
Oh, interesting. Decanted a white.
Patty, the challenge is that one person likes young and one likes older. You have to find a balance. I mean, you know, like I want my white wine a year out, fresh, vibrant, zippy, zesty, and you know, you want your old white to be a little more, you know,
rounded,
really oxidized, but a little more textured and rounder and stuff. And where do you find the happy medium that can please both? Because when you open a bottle of wine, better to share.
It's true. My girlfriend and I just celebrated our 18th anniversary together, 18 years, not months, as some people say. And we went to our lovely French restaurant here in Paso Robles, BL Brasserie. And I had pulled out a bottle that we'd been saving for a long time. It was a 2005 Hermitage Blanc from Jaboulet. And unfortunately, I had kept it in what I thought were pristine conditions, but it was well oxidized and unfortunately just not drinkable, which was disappointing because I know some whites can last, and this was more of an experiment. And you win some, you lose some. But they had a really lovely Hermitage Blanc on the wine list that we ended up enjoying as well.
There you go.
Exactly. Perfect. So let's move on to the Grenache Blanc. This is a 2020 Grenache Blanc, and as Allison had pointed out earlier, the Picpoul, I guess by being a year older, has a little more of a straw color or golden color to it compared to this Grenache Blanc, where generally I think of a Grenache Blanc as being a darker white, just some of the ones that I have had around here. So this was obviously Grenache Blanc, the first grapes that you planted on the property, as you mentioned, which is interesting because I know Grenache Blanc is a component of the Chateauneuf-du-Pape whites, but it's not generally the prime component. Clairette Blanche, which we'll get to later, tends to lead a lot of those wines. So was this more about the availability of a Rhone white that you were looking for, or kind of take us through your decision to plant Grenache Blanc at that time?
So Grenache Blanc, we knew of Grenache Blanc being planted in Lodi. So it was a Garnacha Blanca clone from Spain, and the Bocage winery had that planted. So we knew that it was suited. And this was in the beginning of our journey. Plus, I had found that the majority of blends I had tried from France did have a sizable component of Grenache Blanc in it. So we have 3 acres planted here of Grenache Blanc. We have, it's used in all of our blends. We have 2 blends. And we find that this wine gives a beautiful mid palate that holds the blends together. We also make a sparkling Grenache Blanc, method champenoise, sparkling Grenache Blanc too. But it's basically I'd say our number 1 wine in the tasting room is the Grenache Blanc. But I'm a foodie, and this is an amazing food wine, I must say. It goes with so many different things. As simple as a ham sandwich with mayonnaise, or, as fancy as you can possibly go. But sushi, it's a great sushi wine. So it has a great acid and a great mid palate, which is not easily achieved in lots of wines.
Yeah.
This one, by the way, won Best of Class in the 2022 San Francisco Chronicle Wine Competition. So
congratulations. That's awesome. Yes. And, ham sandwich with mayo sounds so much nicer if you say jambon avec aioli.
Exactly.
No, and Grenache Blanc is one of those grapes that you mentioned the Garnacha Blanca. Is that what you ended up planting, or were you also sourcing this from Tablas Creek? Because I know Tablas was the mother vine of Grenache Blanc here in the United States. They were the first ones to bring it over and plant the French Grenache Blanc, the Rhone Grenache Blanc. And so if you have a Grenache Blanc anywhere, the odds are that it circles back, or its progenitor is that Tablas Creek fruit that was brought over initially.
Yes, so this is from the Tablas clone.
Nice.
Nice.
Well, it has that, that lovely little honey note on the nose, where it's kind of that honey crisp apple, and then gets into that crispness and that richness, and also the earthiness, which I find Grenache Blanc to be one of the earthier of the Rhone varietals, picking up a lot more of the stone, the minerality than some of the others.
Yeah, I think it has, in addition to like a green apple or a pear character to it, it's got a long dry finish too. And I know I was going to say something else and now it's left me, but yeah, I don't know. It's always been vibrant. It's always been, it's been great in the vineyard. Oh, I know what I was going to say. A lot of red wine drinkers that say, I don't like white wines, gravitate to this wine. And my theory is it's a variation of red Grenache. So it's a, you know, it's a blonde version of red Grenache, but it has that big mid palate that you're getting from the Grenache.
Yeah.
So the Grenache Blanc is a white grape, just to clarify. We just planted Grenache Gris, which even though the name would suggest gray, it's a pink Grenache. And so we'll see how that is in a couple of years. But we're actually really thrilled with Grenache, and we feel that it kind of defines what we do here.
Nice. Yeah. Grenache Blanc is really, I find, you know, maybe it and Albarino seem to be the two grapes, at least here in Paso Robles, that have kind of come from nowhere to really establish themselves in the hierarchy, kind of just below Viognier as the most prominent white grapes. Are you seeing that in Lodi, or a lot of people working with Grenache Blanc, or, you know, do you kind of have a little bit of a market on it?
Yeah, there's a few Grenache Blancs planted, but, you know, I always was a fan of the previous San Francisco Chronicle wine writer that said, I can't believe more Grenache Blanc is not planted because it's such an amazing food wine. And when we planted ours, there were about 300 acres planted in the US. Now there's close to 700 acres planted. So see, just in the last 10 or so years, that many more vines have been planted. And I think it's because people are starting to know what it is. And that was always a hurdle for us. I'm introducing all these wines that no one have ever heard of that walk in the tasting room, but that's kind of our modus operandi.
Yeah. So how have you managed to combat that? Is it really just hand selling each of these wines, or?
Yeah, we sell everything out of the tasting room. So, and for years we were selling out, and we were actually closed for a few months out of the year. Until we planted more grapes. But yeah, it's all hand sell. So people have to try the wines before they fall in love with them. I've had people that have never tried the wines try one wine and say they want to join the club. And I say, well, you should try the other wines. And they're like, no, if this is an indication, I'm going to like them all. So we've had pretty much most people that come in the tasting room join our club. And our wines are limited. They sell out every year. And so that's a reason to join the club. Yeah.
Yeah. Get them while you can. Oh, Teresa, you are sloppy drunk, aren't you?
And yes. I haven't even started.
She's spilling all over my papers on my desk. She's pouring your Grenache Blanc. So you mentioned with the Picpoul that's kind of the easy wine to go, you know, it's set it and forget it, the Rhone style. I imagine this is a wine that spends a little bit of time on its lees. It does have that richer, fuller mouthfeel. It has that weight to it. Was that something that you know, when you first planted this, first started working with it, you decided to leave it on its lees, stir it, or is that something that over time as tasting it, you decided it needed a little bit more of that body?
Yeah, I learned over time that stirring the lees, you know, and it's not like these are in barrels. So most time you hear about lees stirring, it's because they're stirring them in barrels. This is a, you know, fairly large 2,500 gallon tank where we're stirring the lees.
Just like a big blender, you just put like two giant whisks in there and kind of turn it.
But it does add a nice textural quality to the wine, and it's definitely worth it. And it's something that's done every week for many months out of the year. But I think it adds character to the wine.
Yeah, and you mentioned you've got 3 acres of this, so about as much as you have of the Picpoul. Is this something you're looking to expand upon? How many total acres, you know, do you have planted? How much expansion ability do you have?
We're pretty much tapped out. So we just planted a 5-acre parcel with Picpoul, Grenache Gris, and actually Cinsault, which is a red grape.
One of my favorite grape.
So we have 2 acres of that planted, and it's going into a rosé format. But we have an 18-acre property, and we have 16 acres of grapes planted, and the rest of the property is basically the winery, tasting room, and our home. So we live on the property too. So we're pretty much tapped out when it comes to that. And it's going to take us to close to 6,000 cases from 300 cases where we started. And so at my age, I'm 65 right now. I feel like that's probably good enough for now, at least. But I've said that before, so we'll see.
Well, and not only that, but generally, if you talk to a lot of winemakers, the minute you start to hit about 2,500 or 3,000 cases, that's when they look to distribution to kind of get their wines out there. So the fact that you're selling 6,000 cases through your tasting room exclusively, your club, obviously all DTC, is a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, we're at 4,000 now. We'll be at 6,000 in a few years, but we don't have any reason to believe we can't sell it out of the tasting room because we're already selling out of wines that were just released in April. So so fingers crossed.
If you haven't realized, when Sue makes a fan, she keeps a fan.
So how do you do that? Obviously, the wines are a big selling point of theirs, but since the average wine club membership tends to be somewhere in the realm of like 18 to 24 months, how are you keeping your club members happy?
Well, I think, they like the wines year to year. I think the price point is really good. I think that these are wines you can't typically get other places. Mm-hmm. And we're finding even the millennials not wanting to drink mom and dad's Cabernet and Chardonnay. They want something unique and different, although probably my average club members pretty much close to my age, maybe. But definitely a lot of interest from the younger people that are really liking something new and different and something they haven't tried before.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And do you find, you're getting a lot of word of mouth, people kind of spreading? I know a good friend of Allison's and mine, Rick Dean, in South Carolina, is preaching the gospel of your wines out there and tends to bring them in.
Our other friend, JVB, who...
Yeah, JVB.
Yes, Jim Van Bergen in New York.
I think he drinks a bottle of Acquiesce at least once a week, because I see an Instagram post almost weekly of some bottle he's opened up. So
he's on that 5 to 6 case per year club membership.
No, they're great. They're great. They're a lot of fun, and really appreciate them getting the word out. And actually a lot of the members we've gotten are people visiting, and they stop in the tasting room. They have the wine shipped to them, then their neighbor tries the wine, their sister tries the wine, and it spreads that way. And it's been now over 10 years, and so we're accumulating members that way. And
I mean, not to disclose a private message I got over here, but I was told by someone in this group that it was gulpable wine. So
gulpable, not quaffable, but gulpable. That's impressive.
Same thing. No, I think
maybe we'll do a 7-Eleven partnership, so you can have a super big gulp of Bourboulenc.
Wouldn't that be great?
I think it's cool. We're only into the second wine here, but for people who call themselves red wine drinkers, or people who fancy a white wine from time to time, I think even just tasting the first two, you see the diversity that a white wine, it's not apples to bananas, but you see different textures and different, how it feels different on the palate, just to show the diversity that white wine can have, and why white wine should never be, you wouldn't hesitate to do a flight of red wines, but why wouldn't you hesitate? Why would you hesitate to do white? They're not fluffy, light, boring. They're delicious.
Thank you.
It is, yeah. I'm always amazed by the amount of people I run into, or when I work at the Ranchero Cellars tasting room, who play the, I only drink reds. Like, why limit yourself? That's like, I only date blondes. It's just not, it's not the way to go. Or I only date women under like 5'3". It just, it's not the way to go. Yes, I'm with Carrie. I hate the word quaffable as well. It's it sounds disgusting and kind of semi-perverted. But
I think comparing these two wines, getting into the Grenache Blanc, you get much more texture, much more full palate. I was looking, Matt, you got cod in a lemon white wine sauce with poached tomatoes. A recipe from Tablas Creek, we should say.
yes.
Is that what they recommend with their Grenache Blanc? And does it work?
Yeah. And then David and Patty had it with provolone cheese, which I find a really interesting pairing because of the richness, the saltiness, kind of that earthiness of provolone. I can see that with the minerality, the brightness, but also that smoothness that this wine has on the palate.
I agree. I can totally see it with provolone or with any sort of a medium textured soft cheese or medium hard cheese. This would work great. Whereas the Picpoul, I would do with like a goat cheese and do the chalkiness with the acidity.
Yeah, I want to go to Philly and get one of those roasted pork, provolone, and broccolini sandwiches.
There you go.
They're known for.
And fresh mozzarella. So cavallo with the Grenache Blanc and fresh mozzarella. I mean, if it's straight from Naples or Southern Italy, then anything.
Beautiful. So let's move on to our third wine, which is the 2019, again, going back in time, like Huey Lewis in the news, to the Bourboulenc. Now, this is a true treat because this is one of those obscure, one of the 13 varietals, which is Sue said varietal, so I think it's perfectly fine to say varietal. Allison.
Varieties.
Yeah, varieties.
That
the varietal Bourboulenc.
Right. Anyway, it's one of the 13 grapes that's legally allowed to be used in Chateauneuf-du-Pape wines, Blanc or Noir, whichever they want. But, this is a grape that very, very, very few people ever get the chance to taste in its 100% true varietal form. You will not find this in France, as far as I know. Sue, correct me if I'm wrong. As a single varietal wine, I don't know of anybody anywhere in the Rhone up and down doing a 100% Bourboulenc. So it really seems like it's you and Tablas Creek at this point who are, not only growing this varietal but championing it. So, what made you want to bring this grape into the fold to plant this and to showcase it as a 100% variety rather than blend it with Grenache Blanc, Clairette, and do something closer to a white Chateauneuf?
Well, I really wanted to showcase the whites of Chateauneuf-du-Pape, this being one of them. And actually, we were the first in the US to plant it. Tablas brought it over, but they weren't planting the year it was available from UC Davis. So I actually sent Jason Haas a bottle so he could try it.
Did you write "Suck it, Jason" on the label? Because I totally will.
I just opened a package and there's Bourboulenc in it. Yeah. So, it's definitely a leap to try to plant something like this, and you're just hoping it's going to be fine. I obviously tried several blends that had the Bourboulenc in and knew that if nothing else, it would work in a blend. But we've had a lot of interest in it. The first year we had it in tank, we had 3 masters of wine come visit us because they had never tried it. And so single varietal. When we were in Chateauneuf-du-Pape last time, I was at a winery that had very similar grapes to mine. And I had asked them if they ever had tried the Bourboulenc single varietal. Even though it's planted on their property, they co-ferment a lot of these varietals. So they co-ferment the Bourboulenc with Clairette Blanche. So even though someone had lived in the vineyard all these years and owned the winery, they had never tried Bourboulenc on its own. But yeah, so I think that it's really makes your mind do fun things because it's so different in some respects. If you're a white wine drinker, then you can't really put it in a box. And I think that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I kind of find it almost the binary opposite of the Grenache Blanc, which has, a little bit on the attack and then you really feel it in the mid palate before it goes. This one has a lot of attack and then kind of fades in the mid palate, but then comes back up on the finish. And there's really a ton of that like whetstone minerality on it. I find it's almost very granite-esque, which is interesting.
On the back, I get the granite that you're talking about, but it hits the tongue, and like you said, it kind of goes back, but it just tingles at the front of the palate.
Yeah.
It's in some ways it seems zestier than the Picpoul.
Yeah.
In its vibrancy.
And I must say, this has been, so of all the staff that works in our tasting room and my assistant winemaker, the Bourboulenc has been kind of our go-to. You know, when we're out in the winery, that's the one we pull out. We know them all, we drink them all, we love them all. But I don't know if it's just because it's a newer wine, but it's always trying to figure it out. It's just so unique. Yeah, and we use it in 2 blends now. So we use it in our Bel Blanc blend and our Ingenue blend. And it just really adds amazing things to a blend. But, you know, we think it's really cool. As Americans, we like to put grapes in all by themselves, unlike the French. And so this gives us an opportunity to try it at least. So yeah, we love it.
So go ahead, Allison.
I was just gonna say about that. I was in the Rhone Valley like 2018, 2019. And what I found fascinating, I went to Découverte du Rhone, which is like Hospice du Rhone that happens in Paso. They alternate years, and Découverte du Rhone is a big Rhone wine festival, but it actually travels through the Rhone Valley. So when you start in the south and you drink Southern Rhone and you make your way up. And one of the things I found is in Southern Rhone, where they typically blend, the wines are always a blend. There were a few producers who were focused on doing single variety wines. And it was almost a reverse mentality because their families had always done blends. And, you know, blends can enhance grapes, and blends are not, we shouldn't underestimate blends, but historically blends were made because they helped compensate for inadequacies that one grape or another would have. And the sum can be greater than the parts, but it can also mask things if you have problems, which historically, that's why blends were used.
Right.
Underripe grapes and ripe grapes and stuff. And I met a lot of producers who are really focused right now on making single variety wines to understand what each grape adds to a blend. And so in America, we might start with grape before we make a blend. It's great to see these young winemakers who are saying, look, you know, now we have technology and we have connections to the international world, and we have, you know, information that our grandparents didn't have, but we want to understand what Grenache does in the soil. What does Grenache Blanc do? Because once you blend them, you kind of lose.
Yeah, the uniqueness of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's impressive that those winemakers doing that, because there are such strict rules for French winemaking about, you know, what you can call a Gigondas or a Côte de Rhone or a, you know, Chateauneuf-du-Pape, Blanc or Noir. So, you know, basically when you're doing a single varietal of that, you're having to call it either a vin de table, or you're trying to convince the commandery of that particular region that because your grape was grown there, you can still consider it Chateauneuf-du-Pape, even though it is a single variety wine. Maybe they're not doing that, I don't know. But it is, you know, that is one of the issues with the experimentation in France, is it immediately drops your cost basis, the revenue that you can make on a wine, if you start to experiment too much and scribble outside the lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, this is interesting. So take us through, you mentioned your 2 blends, your Bel Blanc and your Ingenue Blanc. Take us through, you know, what are you striving for with those blends? How do they differentiate from each other? What grapes are you using? Are you using the same grapes every year? Or is it something where you're kind of, you know, tasting what's in the vineyard and deciding this is going to go into Bel, this is going to go into Ingenue, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we always do benchtop trials, but we kind of have a formula that we're looking for, so our customers know what to expect year after year. So we started with the Bel Blanc blend, which was my homage to a white Chateauneuf-du-Pape. And currently it's 50% Roussanne and 30% Grenache Blanc, and 20% Bourboulenc. And originally I had 10% Viognier in this blend. And it's because I didn't have the Bourboulenc. I didn't have a varietal that would give it the kick I wanted to give it. And so this year, the 21 with the Bourboulenc is a huge hit right out of the gates. So I'll have to send you one, Allison. But so
Okay.
that one is our Belle Blanc, and then our Ingenue.
I'm right here. I'm right here, Sue.
Also, you, Chris, also
Jesus,
for sure.
come on.
And the Ingenue is a blend of pretty much these unique varietals. So the Ingenue is 35% Clairette Blanche, 35% Grenache Blanc, 20% Bourboulenc, and 10% Picpoul Blanc. So stylistically, it's a much, I want to say, delicate wine than the one with Roussanne, obviously. But it really is a fun wine if you love blends, because you can really feel the components all come together. And I notice people that are huge in the wine industry or people that know wines will gravitate towards the Ingenue because it's got the delicate floral and fruit flavors. So yeah, I suggest you try them.
I think what's I'm losing my thought on that one. It was no about the grapes, but never mind. I'll come back to my time.
I was going to ask. So, is your mindset that the Belle Blanc every year is going to be, closer to the Chateauneuf-du-Pape Blanc style that obviously was the inspiration for it, and then the Ingenue is, not necessarily kind of everything else, but to really showcase the unusual side of things.
Yes, exactly. And we don't want them to be, similar,
Right.
but definitely Roussanne heavy on the Belle Blanc, which Roussanne, we have single varietal also. And
Varietal, Allison,
variety. We have also.
No, you're fine, Sue. Don't correct yourself. You're good.
Yeah. And, Roussanne, I think too, I know we don't have that featured here, but is, I think it's worth a discussion. It's a very difficult grape to grow. It's been grown in the US off and on for 100 years, and there's only 300 acres of it. So unless you're a crazy winemaker that has a vineyard, there's no way you would grow it. You're not going to get a good crop from it. You're going to get an uneven ripeness. So you're going to leave a lot left behind. But I love Roussanne. My most memorable wine in France is Roussanne from Château-Beaucastel with duck confit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Actually,
So,
that's what I was gonna say. That's where I lost my train of thought, is that what's interesting is a lot of times we see Marsanne Roussanne blended together. In fact, we mostly see that. And then you'll more often can see Marsanne by itself. To find a single varietal Roussanne is less common. So, and
see, that's funny because, sorry to cut you off, Allison, but here in Paso Robles, I will say I see much more single variety Roussanne than I do single variety Marsanne. I think Marsanne is the rarer grape around here.
Oh, did I reverse what I was saying? That is probably what I was gonna. That is the way, right? Because the Roussanne, but the Marsanne, but that's what I was gonna say. What's really cool with what you're doing, Sue, is that you make a Marsanne, you make a Roussanne, you make a Viognier.
Marsanne.
Not Marsanne?
Nope.
Viognier.
I'm anti-Marsanne.
So what do you have against Marsanne?
Yeah, what did it do to you?
The almond,
Well,
is it the almond flavor?
Well, I've always, before I made the decision, I tried over 20 Marsannes, and I was not impressed with it. I thought that Roussanne was the premier grape and Marsanne was substandard to Roussanne. Finally, I read Patrick Comiskey's book, The American Rhones, and I was like, that's what it is. So in France, they plant them in the same vineyards because Roussanne is the princess and you don't get a full crop every year. But if you have them planted together, you're always going to get a crop. It might be less Roussanne, it might be more Marsanne, and they're very similar grapes. So it never made sense to me why you would blend grapes that are like each other.
Okay, and I was saying the right thing.
Okay.
I have seen Marsanne out there alone. I'm not a fan of Marsanne either because I think Marsanne, you can throw it to people who claim they only drink Chardonnay, throw them a Marsanne and bring them into the Rhone varieties. But Roussanne is such an exciting grape. Maybe there's a lot in Paso, but you don't see a lot that's not blended. So when you can get your hands on it, I think it's worth checking out because I think it's an incredible grape.
Well, plus we have unoaked Roussanne, which I have yet to find an unoaked Roussanne. And so to give it its honey, peachy notes up front is something you don't normally get because they're put through malolactic fermentation and put in oak. So we have a lot of Roussanne fans that like the fact that ours are unoaked. But
I'll have to send you a bottle. I believe we've been members of the Cass Winery here in Paso Robles for a long period of time, and they do a single varietal Roussanne and a single varietal Marsanne. And I believe their Roussanne is all stainless steel.
Oh,
it is unoaked.
love to
I will
try.
have to ask Sterling, the winemaker there, just to confirm that. But if that's the case, I will send you a bottle because that is the Roussanne that I was introduced to, and I find it is brighter, has more acidity than the Marsanne, which the Marsannes that I have had can be sometimes very flat and kind of high alcohol, not the acidity, and they get that overwhelming kind of almond amaretto flavor to them that that can be a bit off-putting.
I agree.
Before we move on to wine, Patty, I'm gonna deflect. I'll jump in, but Patty messaged me asking me what I smell in this wine, so I thought I could tell a little what I'm smelling. But Sue,
Nobody asked me what I smell. It's very simple.
No, I mean I'm getting the citrus, the citrus aromas, a little more lime and stuff. I get a lot of minerality out of this wine, kind of the granite, some floral notes. I got a hint of herbaceousness at first when I put my nose in, but I am having trouble finding that right now. But there was a little bit of herbaceousness.
I get a beeswax honey character on the nose, which is interesting because this wine, as acidic as it is, loves a hint of honey. So if you have something with a little honey in it, or it loves corn, which is sweet also. So it loves things with a hint of sweetness to it. We pair it with a corn and coconut soup in the winery when that was one of our pairings. Then I think for this, we were suggesting a grilled Mexican street corn.
Yeah, you said the classic elote.
And elote we've done with the tiny little baby corns in the tasting room, which was a lot of fun too.
Matt and Carrie made Mexican street corn.
Oh, you did? Oh, how is it? Good?
Yeah, they're giving super props to the elote. So I feel like you need to be selling your wine. The one place you should be distributing it to is all the eloteros in LA. When they go around honking their horns, they can have the elote and
a bottle of
exactly. I think that's perfect.
Blanc.
I love it. No, this is a wonderful wine. Again, it's really a treat to be able to taste something that, to truly like 98% of the wine world is shut out. It's just there's so few people producing a single varietal version of this that it is a rarity and a true treat to be able to experience something like this. I know you mentioned your recent plantings. Have you thought about, now that Tablas Creek has all 13 Chateauneuf varietals at their disposal, have you thought about bringing in Picardan and Vacarès and some of the more unusuals, or is that a bridge
No,
too?
I mean, I've tried Picardan, and I think it's very similar to some of the blends that we do.
Okay.
And I think that probably the grape varietal itself is maybe a combination of a couple of the others. I don't know how you feel. I thought it was lovely. Everything Tablas does is lovely. But I just didn't see it fitting in our profile as being quite unique from what we're already doing. Yeah.
Full disclosure, we are white wine club members of Tablas Creek.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, exactly. In fact,
Great.
we have what is it? Oh, anyway, I'll remember. We have another obscure varietal that they're doing, one that's used in, I don't know why I'm blanking on it, but it's used in cognac, similar to Colombard. It's used in the cognac production in that region. Anyway, let's move on. Clairette Blanche,
Yes.
which again, 2020. Hate to harken back to Tablas Creek, but clearly you guys are running on parallel tracks, which I think is very, very interesting. The first, what?
Not Uni Blanc, Follet Blanc.
No, it's not Uni Blanc. I'll go when you're engaging Sue. I'll go look into our cellar and see what it is. Oh, it's Petit Manseng. That's what it is.
Oh yeah,
Petit
yeah.
Manseng. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, very big in Virginia as well, which is interesting. Anyway, the first single varietal Clairette Blanche that I had was Tablas Creek's 2017. We had it New Year's Eve 2018 into 19 at Thomas Hill Organics here in Paso Robles. I saw it on the menu, was shocked to see it, ordered a bottle, and it absolutely blew my mind. So I'm so excited that you're working with this grape. It's another one here in Paso Robles that you're starting to see more and more of it being produced. I know a few people have it planted and whatnot, but how did you get started on this grape? How long have you been growing it? And take us through the mindset of sort of working with Clairette Blanche.
So I obviously knew about the grape, but actually this one is not a Tablas clone. It's a Foundation Plant Services clone.
Okay.
The Tablas clone was not available for us to plant. A lot of these varieties that came from France with the Tablas clones had virus issues. Right. And so a lot of wineries that bought these grapes have had them. So some of them have been pulled off market from time to time while they resolve virus issues. So I was getting ready to plant a 6-acre parcel and decided I wanted to try these unique varieties, and got the Clairette Blanche from Foundation Plant Services. And I had tried, of course, Clairette de Die. I'm sure you're familiar with the sparkling version of this, which we are making this year, by the way.
Are you?
Yes, we're doing a sparkling Clairette.
Are you doing
be ready for a couple
the
years.
Sweet style Clairette de Die? Are you doing a full dry?
No. So they also make a dry 100% Clairette, and that's the one that's hard to find in the U.S. But it's beautiful, and we're going to be working on that. It'll take a couple years before it's ready. But I knew that this wine had very complex florals, fragrances, and it's also not so fruit forward. It's more of a fennel character to it that's different than these most of our other wines in that aspect. What was shocking to me with this wine, it's still shocking to me, even though we planted it in 2015. Our first harvest was 2017, a small harvest. And then our 2018 right now is amazing in the tasting room. And actually, I think we only have a few cases left. But this wine loves cheese, like any cheese except cheddar. Cheddar's a beer cheese. But I mean, we first released it. We had it with Telaggio from Italy. We had it with Seascape from California. We had it with Triple Creme from France, and from Switzerland. I forget the name, but yeah.
Like Emmentaler?
Emmentaler. Any cheese that's from Europe that you can think of, this wine is just amazing with it. So anytime I have a cheese plate or anything heavy with cheese, I know it's going to go. So we do these pairings every month, and we know that if one of the pairings is a lot of cheese, that's going to be number one with Clairette. So
I think this wine has the most beautiful acidity. It's like a rain shower of acidity across your tongue. It's everywhere, and it's delicious.
And I think that's why it goes so well with the fatty cheeses, the bries, it's just like, it just is a perfect match. And, a lot of now in the Southern Rhone, I don't know if you've heard, but they're planting a lot more Clairette Blanche. They're planting a lot more Bourboulenc. With global warming, they're kind of shying away from the reds and focusing more on the whites. But I think, whites were kind of a thing years ago in France where they didn't have proper refrigeration. You'd have a lot of oxidation. But now that we have, jacketed tanks and you can keep them chilled, they're really focusing more on their whites. But this one in particular, but yeah, I get a kind of like a dried apricot, figgy character to this, but definitely more on the fennel character nose.
I think
I want to know what you paired with this. Did you follow Sue's directions? What did you guys pair? Nothing?
Yeah.
And what was your pairing, Sue, please? What do you normally pair?
I had suggested a ham and Gruyere jambon.
That's right.
So yeah, Gruyere cheese with this is just peel a piece of Gruyere and eat it with this.
I saw David eating cheese, so I have faith that he's eating a cheese and wine pairing.
Yeah, it's super, super fun when you pair it with cheeses for whatever reason. I mean, it's fun when you just, the wine's good. You like the wine, but when you try this and it's like this magic happening, it makes it super fun.
Chinese chicken salad. That's an interesting pairing. You mentioned the apricots in that, so I can see with the apricots, almonds, some of the more bitter greens that are in there, the fried wontons. That could very, very, very nicely pair with
mayonnaise because of the fat content. Yeah. Anything with the fat content pairs super well.
So a croque monsieur is what we should
exactly. Yes, for sure.
Beautiful. No, what I love about this wine is I think it's the most complex out of all four of these, and I think it's the most challenging. Like, I get almost some savory to like bitter herb notes, like just off the front of this, and it has this really like thin minerality to it that I think is really intriguing. And I remember when I had that Tablas, the minerality was one of the things that stood out to me, just how lean and kind of sharp it was. And I find the same thing, but I think that makes it a more interesting wine because it's just not fruit. I'm going to lay back and enjoy it. It kind of makes you stand up and pay attention to it because it has so many of these different aspects working with it.
Yeah, I agree. It's been fun.
To David's question, and I will just comment, and this is a great time for you, Chris, to go run and get that wine that you wanted to check.
Oh, well, no, it's Petit Man Sing. I know it was, but thank you.
Try to get rid of you,
Yeah, it's fair. Wouldn't be the first time.
It is a generalization that's a misnomer of red wines from hot climates and white wines. The key is grapes. There are grapes that thrive in hot climates. There are grapes that thrive in cooler climates. When you're in a hot climate, you have to have a grape that has thicker skins that can handle the sun. You have to do a lot of leaf management, and it's when you pick. And with cooler climates, you need grapes that they might be thinner skin, but need the time, a long hang time to ripen. Yeah. Because the key is phenolic ripeness. And if you're in a really hot place, you can get sugars really quickly before you get phenolic. So it's really about what grapes go well in different places, which Europe has generally found, and America has slowly figured out what grows well. There are producers in Napa Valley. I was traveling with a journalist a few months ago who wrote a book that, if you're into Italian wine, I highly recommend. It's called South of Somewhere. You don't have to be into wine to like it. It's just an amazing book. But one of the things we did in between events to promote his book was to visit wineries focused on Italian grapes. And one of the things we heard time and again was about where California is climate-wise to Italy, especially Southern Italy and Piedmont. And we're not talking about the Sangiovese debacle of Napa trying to make Sangiovese 20 years ago. But I heard numerous producers in Napa, Sonoma, and Paso who were, especially Napa, who were just like, we're wrong planting Cabernet here.
Yeah.
It's wrong. But no one's going to pull it out because it makes so much money. But what should be growing there? Everyone says Vermentino would thrive. And then for red grapes, change your grapes into, other things. But, we're very set in thinking that Napa for Cabernet and Lodi for Zinfandel and Paso for Zin and Cabin, and white grapes are what's really thriving in these places. I mean,
but they have to be done right is the key, which is, as the temperatures get hotter, you have to really focus on your canopy management, your bricks versus your acid levels, because we have a tremendous amount of Viognier grown here in Paso Robles, but some of it can just be this like massive, fruity, heavy, oily balm with no acid to it, which takes away from what Viognier should be. So yes. It's kind of what works in the environment and how you manage it.
Yeah, and so David, ultimately you want grapes to be in the right environment, but you're aspiring for phenolic ripeness and maintaining acidity. And hot climates can be a challenge to do that. Cold climates have their own challenges, but that is the challenge of a hot climate.
Yeah. Like Roussan's a really interesting grape because you have it grown out in the Savoie, which is one of the coolest areas of France along the Swiss borders there, high elevation. But then you also have it grown down in the southern Rhone, where it gets a lot more heat, a lot more richness to it, loses its acidity, but picks up a lot of other components to it.
And I think a good example, there are certain grapes that you can tell, and I don't know, Sue, with your experience in any of this, but like Pinot Noir is a great one. You can tell the cool climate. Pinot doesn't do well in hot climates, but you can tell warmer climates from cool climates. And Grenache is another grape that Syrah, there are warmer climate Syrahs and cooler climate, and they produce different style wines, not here and here, but I tend to be drawn more to cool climate Grenache and Syrah than warm climate. That's my preference.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that there's, just because you decide that you like a grape, you really have to consider where it's grown and what the winemaker is doing there. And especially with climate change, you really have to pay attention to what they're doing.
Right.
And $300 Cabernets are called Ego.
Yeah, which isn't right. Although, to be fair, here in Paso, we have our first $100 white wine, which is also Ego, but that exists as well. But like a great example is something that Sue has now planted quite a bit of, which is Cinsault, which is a grape that really thrives in warmer environments and can be made into some really interesting lighter white wines. But because it's a relatively unknown grape to a lot of drinkers, it's not something that's widely planted. It can also be a very challenging grape, especially when it's young. It can really overproduce and kind of affect the quality of it.
Yeah, and most people, I think, don't realize that Lodi has the oldest Cinsault plantings in the world.
That's my mecca is the Bechtold Vineyard. It is
Bechtold Vineyard.
One of my favorite places on earth.
Yeah, so the reason that is because of the phylloxera rot epidemic in France wiped out all of the Cinsault, and we had some planted here. It's still planted since the 1800s. And so Michael David is the one that gets the majority of the fruit from there. But yes, Cinsault grows well here. We're just starting to get to know it. I purchased a few tons from a wine club member who has a small vineyard that provides fruit for Clinker Bricks Rosé.
Okay.
And so we made a Cinsault Rosé this year, and it's actually found out today it's sold out. We released it a month ago. Wow. And we put a little bit of Cinsault in our Grenache Rosé for aroma. I think it has beautiful aromas, but we're trying to learn it and how we're going to utilize it going forward.
Yeah.
So, I have to say, because I know you focus on white wines, you guys were all part of the Two Shepherds one, and he sources from Bechtold, but he tried to make a rosé with Cinsault and lost the color. So he made a Blanc de Cinsault. And in your white wine theme, I think a Blanc de Cinsault is a gorgeous wine.
There we go. There we go. We can mix it with Grenache Gris maybe too, and make a white wine with it.
There you go. Well, and yeah, my good friends, the Dubosts, who were one of the first wineries we featured here, one year had a substantial amount of Grenache Noir left over. So they decided to do a white Grenache Noir. And it is, and I've started to see a few of those wines popping up here and there, is people taking traditional red varietals and pressing them off and doing white wines with them, which is always interesting. So
it's fun.
So Sue, as we kind of wrap up here, what do you see for the future of Acquiesce? You mentioned, you're nearly at capacity for your vineyards. 6,000 cases is probably going to be about your limit. Are you looking at any other varietals to plant, or are you pretty much content with, the team you've got and you're going to go to war with them from now on?
Well, I'm pretty much content, but I hired a young assistant winemaker that's made wine in Australia, New Zealand, and Walla Walla. And so she's been behind our first ever red wine under her label, Christina's Outlier.
We're going to put that in quotes, red wine.
Red wine. And so she has lots of great energy and lots of great ideas. And I think we're going to see some fun things coming as a result of that. I feel like I've been there, done that, and she's not feeling that way. And she's going to bring a lot of great energy and fun. And she's looking at maybe some bubblies, some simple bubblies, and with beer caps on them in small bottles. And well, not a pet nat, but just a little carbonated, fun wine. And we have a Picpoul Blanc sparkling that will be ready next year, and a sparkling Grenache Rosé. And then we're starting work on the Clairette Blanche this fall, sparkling. And so we probably will have a sparkling portfolio also going forward. But yeah, it's all method champenoise, so it's a couple years in the making, but it's fun.
Sue?
Yes?
We've talked about this before, but maybe you could tell the story of your bottle shape.
Yeah, who does your glass? It's beautiful.
Oh, so our glass is done outside of Venice, Italy. These are custom molds for us. And if you look at the bottom of the bottle, we have Our Lady Acquiesce in the very bottom of the bottle. And I wanted initially to just showcase that these are Provençal style or Southern Rhone style wines. And I think you get that image when you see the bottle, that it's something different. And they've been a big hit. Unfortunately, because of the glass situation, the shipping situation, and lots of other factors this year, we've got some fall wines that are going to be in more boring glass, but we're told we'll get the rest of our order that was placed a year ahead of time.
Boring glass, are you going soft shouldered or high shouldered?
On the regular glass,
you have to go boring. Yeah.
Boring. Yeah. I mean, they'll be kind of like this. You might not notice it, but yeah, it'll be kind of more.
So more of a burgundy style bottle than
a standard flint. And flint is hard to get. So these clear bottles are actually quite hard to get now, because they need to have the best glass to have a clear bottle. The green and the other bottles are usually recycled glass, and it's not as critical to have the best quality. And so I think, but that's kind of boring, but I'll just kind of give you that hint. There's a few that might not have these beautiful bottles.
So don't buy the fall 2022, but stay till spring 2023.
There's still some
buy the fall, but don't judge the bottle.
Right.
Yeah, the wine is still just as good. If the bottle's a little different, but
has this been the glass producer that you've been using since you launched, or did you start it in more domestic glass and then kind of branch out to that?
I always had French glass. I started with Savor Glass, which is a big company in France that makes these bottles. Only the Savor Glass bottles were more of a bowling pin shape. They were a lot harder for people to put in their wine cabinets. They were heavier. So by switching to this bottle, we saved 12,000 pounds of glass a year for our orders. So even though it's a substantial bottle, it's not as big as the one that we had previous to this. So similar shape. It has this floor top where we don't have to use the foil on top of it. And And so, yeah, I mean, we went with this one because we could, and we were hoping to also have less of a footprint for the environment, which I should speak to. Everything that we grow here is under the Lodi rules for sustainability. So we're very super focused on the quality of the vineyard. We live in the vineyard. Our grandchildren play in the vineyard. And my new assistant winemaker is trying to bring us into regenerative viticulture. So we're headed that way. But we're very
Suck it, Jason Hawes.
Well, he beat us there.
Sure. He was number one, then
Yes.
Troon was number two.
Troon, yep. Mhm.
Nice.
I was just going through when I had pulled up the article I originally wrote on you, Sue. I did an event once and ended up writing about this. I had the Grenache Blanc 2019. I did a wine and potato chip pairing event.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And paired it with Maui onion chips. So in case you ever just want to go old school with wine, Maui onion chips and the Grenache Blanc are an awesome pairing.
That sounds delicious actually right now.
It worked really well, you know. Sue, another question that Patty and David had is, how do you choose what wines you want to turn into sparkling wines? I should say, how do you choose what grapes you want to make sparkling wine from?
How does Christina choose which grapes she wants to make?
Well, we had more Grenache Blanc for one thing, and I knew that Grenache Blanc has a great profile to it, and so I wanted to try Grenache Blanc as our initial sparkling back in 2016. But now I'm looking towards the Picpoul because I really feel that the acidity the Picpoul has is a natural for a sparkling. And so that's part of me planting 2 more acres of the Picpoul. I think it's going to be a big hit. And yeah, so we're trying them all. And actually it's really fun to try wines that aren't typically for sparkling. I think that it can get a little redundant when you're doing the same varietals for sparkling. So it's fun to mix it up.
I totally and wholeheartedly agree with that point. And I have a chart that maps it out. That's okay. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful and eye-opening and fun. So if folks want to purchase the wines, come up and visit, do a tasting, pair it with the food, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you or to come up and be part of it?
So my website is whitewinewinery.com. And you can visit us there, and it's easy to ship wines if you're so interested. If you purchase a case of wine, it's free shipping. And if you'd like to come visit us, there's a link on the first page of the website that you can make a reservation. We suggest reservations, but if we have availability, we will also accept walk-ins. We charge $20 per tasting. And if you decide to join the club, you're comped the $20. And our club members receive a 20% discount on all wine purchases and invites to any special events that we have. But yeah, come check us out. We're doing some fun, unique things here. And I really appreciate being invited to showcase my wines on your beautiful website.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're excited to have you again. You know, Allison suggested that we have you, and between us, we have lots of mutual friends in the wine business, and everybody just raves so highly about you and your wines that it was a no-brainer. One last question I want to ask you, you know, everything you're doing as a state, have you ever considered sourcing grapes from other places to find unique things, or are you pretty much content just staying within your own what you grow?
I'm content to stay with what I grow, but I have a feeling my assistant is going to be looking for other things to add to the mix. So we might have Christina wines that are a little different than ours every year, that are really limited. We only made 50 cases of the Outlier, and we sold it out in 2 weekends. So just to kind of give you an idea, people are looking for unique and different. But yeah, I think that what we're doing now, I'm pretty happy with, but it's fun to have unique things pop up for wine club members to try something a little different every now and then.
So we should be expecting a sparkling red Tannat sometime soon, is what you're saying.
You never know. You never know. Lodi has 120 different varietals grown on 110,000 acres. So we
True.
have a lot to pick from.
I used to think Paso had the widest breadth of different grapes grown until I discovered Lodi, which has that whole German section with Kerner and Dornfelder and some very Roter Veltliner and whatnot in there. Some really unique things. Last but not least, how is your campaign coming to have them dye the Mocumly River green during St. Patrick's Day?
Oh, I don't think that will happen, but they still do it in Chicago, and they dye the beer green. And my husband is born on St. Patrick's Day, so he would always get free beer if he showed his driver's license in a bar in Chicago, but not out here in Lodi.
Yeah, that's too bad. Can't imagine there's not an Irish pub in Lodi that wouldn't
not yet.
serve them that way. All right.
You know, Lodi is definitely a place worth visiting. I didn't believe it until I went there. And I mean, there's that great restaurant with amazing pizzas and stuff.
Antonio's.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you have the Oxford, which is very cool place. And what's the West Side Provisions or West Side Bites or whatever it is? That's
At West Oak Nosh, I think.
That's it, West Oak Nosh. Yeah, it's great.
The pizza place is not in town, right? It's on a.
It is, well, it's not in the downtown, but it's walking distance from downtown.
Right. And I mean, just amazing, like just really great wine country down home experience.
Which their house white, by the way, is a blend of mine. 50% Viognier and 50% Grenache Blanc is their house white.
Oh,
and I don't currently have that in bottle. It's just made specially for them in keg. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I highly recommend. The time I've spent in Lodi has been well worth it. And I think between Allison and I, we can make some great recommendations, obviously with Acquiesce at the top of that list, but we can make some wonderful recommendations for wineries in Lodi to visit. So it's, you know, a bit off the beaten path, but if you're heading up to Sacramento or you're near the Bay Area and need a little sort of side swing, it's a great place to visit and spend a day doing some tasting. You've got some fantastic.
And don't worry, because Sue is our very first Lodi wine, but we will have a couple other Lodi wineries join us.
Yay!
For tastings, because
we will.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up in October, but before that, we should also mention, just to finish up here, that our next virtual tasting is going to be on the 11th of August. And we're going to be featuring a very cool winery called Siebold Cellars, which is based up in Monterey County, in and around Monterey and Carmel. Christopher Miller is the winemaker. He is a certified sommelier who, you know, worked at some of the best restaurants in LA.
I used to sell wine to him when he was the somm at Spago, and now he's a bona fide, fantastic, low innovation winemaker. Yeah,
was named best young sommelier in, I think, 2013 or 2014. I have to look at his bio for that, but some really, really cool. He, you know, if you thought Sue's wines were unusual, and, you know, with Forgotten Grapes, we love the unusual, he's sort of doubled down. So we're going to be having a Trousseau. We're going to be having a Falangina, skin contact Falangina, so an orange wine.
But not a bad one, like a well-made one.
Yes, yeah. We're gonna have a Carignan from him and a Pet Nat. So our first sparkling wine that we'll be doing on that. So should be a lot of fun to enjoy. Apparently Matt dropped out, but we're gonna bring him back in.
Carrie, I hope that wasn't a smirk to Pet Nat. This is a good one.
They can be polarizing. Yes. Well, awesome. Well,
I was talking about something else.
Okay, just making sure.
if Sue's willing to hang around for a couple of minutes, if you want to unmute yourself, and if you have any questions to ask her, more than happy. Sue, we know you're a busy woman, so if you need to go, please let us know. But thank you so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. And I recommend that everyone not only visit, but check out the other wine. You make how many different wines?
Right now, 10 different
Oh.
wines.
We've only had 4, so there's a lot more to try.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I probably should go. I think my husband's making dinner right now, so I probably should go, but please come visit us in Lodi. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me through our website. If you need recommendations for other places to visit, if you want to try red wine wineries. I hope you sometime feature Marcus Nigley's wines. Do you know Marcus? Okay, very unusual wines and great winemaker, and he doesn't have a tasting room, but that would be a fun evening for you also to try his beautiful wines. And he has access to a lot of the German wines actually that you had talked about.
We haven't met, but he likes me because I've written about a couple of his wines because they're really good, and so I'll reach out to him.
And he's Swiss and very good looking, and so people love to talk to him. So
there's nothing I love more than a good looking winemaker. That's part of the reason why we had you on the on the virtual tasting. So
everyone said they love talking to you. In fact, and this isn't said every time, Patty and David said this was one of the best tastings yet.
Wow. Thank you.
And Stacey said it was fun and delicious and found you fascinating. So
thank you.
We get a lot of compliments on all the wonderful winemakers, but one of the best wine tastings yet is not said every week, every month.
That's true.
Well, it's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you really again, Sue.
Thanks for inviting me.
You being here.
All righty.
You take care.
Bye. Bye, Sue.
Thank you.